Hello and welcome to another video from me, Rough Swordsman, Wargamer. It's finally arrived in merry old England, a game that I've been waiting for quite a while, and it is, of course, the Plum Island Horror. Defend and Evacuate the Island. Published, of course, by GMT Games and designed, if you look very carefully, in very small writing, that one and only Hermann Luttmann. So, what's all this about? October the 24th, year unknown. A superstorm slammed into Plum Island off the east coast of the US and plunged the island into a particularly horrifying apocalyptic nightmare. The island's secret biological research facility suffered catastrophic damage and was quickly inundated with a horrifically lethal mixture of chemicals. The poor souls who succumbed to the toxins were reanimated as monstrously altered mutations. But the true horror was yet to come. So the Plum Island Horror is a 1 to 4 player game featuring tactical level unit management and tower defense style survival through cooperative play. 3 unique decks of cards, the event, search and fate decks, drive gameplay, and variable turn order keeps players on their toes as they attempt to save Plum Island. Each player will control one of 6 unique factions, which represent the various groups that populate Plum Island. Each of these factions has its own strengths and weaknesses, which encourages players to optimize for the group's strengths and marginalize its weaknesses in a new way each game. Saving Plum Island will require careful coordination and strategic synergy, which, when executed with precision, might just be enough to evacuate a city under siege and contain the horrific outbreak that threatens to spread beyond the island itself. Well, there we are. Here's some of the game markers, and you can see the look of the game. Very kitsch in its look, I love it. So in the box we've got one mounted game board, 22 by 34 inch, one rulebook and one reference guide, 124 playing cards, 70 cardboard Murder of Horrors tiles, 39 cardboard standees with plastic stands, 210 cardboard markers, 6 player faction mats, 2 NPC stroke horror mutations faction mats, 5 player aids, 1 game track sideboard, 2 cloth bags, 6 custom combat dice, and 83 wooden cubes. And as mentioned, game design Hermann Luttmann, the developer Ken Kuhn, and the graphics Terry Leeds. Ages 14 plus, players 1 to 4, and playing time 45 minutes per player. And on the scale here we've got complexity at 3 out of 9 and the solitaire suitability right at the top, 9 out of 9. Right, let's get the shrink wrap off. Right, the shrink wrap's off, so let's open the box. So the first thing we see, as always, is the rule book. So let's have a look at that. Oh, the rule book is 32 pages with the back cover, full colour, matte paper, and I must admit I love the graphics of this game. Very evocative of the period, which appears to be like sort of 50s, 60s maybe. Yep. So we've got a table of contents, introduction to the story, and a game overview. And I love these sort of flash things, making it very easy to get into the game. This is a great rule book. So looking at all the bits in the box, the maps and the standees, special combat dice, and the baddies, the horrors and the mutations, some game markers, wooden cubes, turn order tokens and such, and how to set up. So that will take you through the whole thing, the whole setup. They've even got an example of setting up the game. First contact, yes, the first thing you do, or one of the first things you do, is to activate one of these murders, and they're going to move down and attack some civilians. So then everybody else is aware of what's going on. Sequence of play. That's split up into sort of hunger phase during the night, activity and end phase. These are all explained in more detail. There's the end phase. The actions that players can do. So just having a quick look through the rules. Don't want to go too much detail. It's not a complex game. You basically got to destroy them horrors and mutants. So movement, combat overview. I have played this a couple of times live. The first time was actually with the designer, Hermann Luttmann, and the guys from the War Room. And more recently, we had a second playthrough with 4 players. So if you want to check that out, I think the second time through was more successful rules-wise. So more on the combat. And then victory and defeat. Lots of ways to lose this game. And then right at the end, we've got the different sort of player modes for solitaire, 2-player, 3-player. Because the setup in this rulebook is geared to a 4-player playthrough. And then rulebook index and some handy tables on the back. There we are, them's the rules. Next, there's a 35-page reference guide. Now, this is very reminiscent of board games from such company as Fantasy Flight Games, which give you a rule book and then a sort of reference book which you can look up specific things if you get stuck. So it says stop, read the rule book first. So it goes into a bit more detail if you're stuck on specific things in the game, special units and examples of play. So all very colourful. And actually an example of play here, a complete round, which you can read through. There's game round 2, game round 3. So they've gone through a complete sort of morning, afternoon and night phase of a day, if you like. And then glossary. So a very helpful reference guide here. In case you get stuck on certain aspects of the game. The golden rules of cooperation, and then the credits at the back. The index for the glossary, and some more reference bits and pieces on the back cover. There we go. Them's the references. Next, there are 6 factions you can choose to play with. It's only up to 4 players playing, but there's 6 factions you can choose from. So let's have a quick look at those. So here's the Greenport Township faction, and each faction has its leader with a special leader ability, and the other members, if you like, of the faction are shown with their sort of ability they can do. And these icons tell you things such as the number of close combat dice you throw, and if you have a sort of ranged combat, which this one doesn't, it'll show you how many dice you can throw. This one does, the surplus armory. Each one comes with a sort of compound that you can build, you can use to put rescue civilians in, for example. But this one can actually attack. Can't move, generally speaking, except for one compound, which I'll show you in a minute. Supplies, which are quite important in this game, are placed there, and a space for other odds and ends that you're going to be using throughout the game. Here's the Plum Island Constabulary with their units and leader. And here's that compound I was mentioning earlier. This can actually move around. This is the paddy wagon. Next, we've got the Pearl Security Services. These are the characters that actually caused the catastrophe in the first place. So it's only fair that you try and clean it up. Then we've got the Neighbourhood Watch, vigilantes, I suppose. The Islanders Athletics Club. And you may have noticed some of the names on these factions have a sort of nod to more famous, well-known characters. For instance, I didn't show you, but the constabulary has Francis Drebin. Some of you may know. And there's a Dr. Venkman in the Pearl Security Services. So look out for those. Give you a chuckle. Here we've got Johnny Deere. And Phil Tiger King, I think, can do range attacks with his golf club, hitting golf balls at the mutants and the horrors. And then lastly, we've got the National Guard. And to play on words here, we've got Mac Reacher, sort of Jack. These also get a helicopter with a range of 3, so 3 dice for that. That's quite powerful. And then there are 2 other, well, factions, if you like. And the first one is the NPC units, which, if they are on the board, you can control with one of your actions, and they do various things. And then, of course, not only do you get piles of horrors advancing towards you, you also can be unlucky and get some of these mutations appearing on the board. And they have some nasty special abilities as well. Then we've got a couple of player aids, the first of which is this single-sided player aid to keep track of turns, the biohazard track, the overrun points track, and how many civilians you've saved. So you can see if the biohazard track gets to here, game over. If the overrun gets to here, game over. And if you manage to save 26 or more points of civilians, you're on the way to winning. And here we've got places which hold cubes. These 2 will be added to the biohazard bag and will contribute to this moving. And here are the hit cubes for yourselves and the mutants. And the other one is a double-sided player aid. And on this side, we've got some quick references. And these show us a sequence of play and some duplications of some of those tables that were on the back of the rule and reference guide. And on the other side, you may, during the course of the game, get some VIP civilians. They're worth more points and have some special abilities as well. Next up, we've got our counter sheets, roughly 4.5 counter sheets. Here's the first one. And as you can see, are pre-rounded. We just have to punch these out, no clipping required. And these are on very thick stock. I think it may even be slightly thicker than the usual brown stock GMT are using. But we've got some supply tokens here, damage tokens for use on the bridges and things which get damaged. The dreaded overrun counters. Some stuff you can find when you're searching, pistols and Molotov cocktails and the like. Some of the other units that can help you, like helicopters and ships which can transport civilians from one of the docks exhausted counters of when you have searched. That area normally becomes exhausted and you have to wait until the end of the night turn to be able to search there again. And here are the compounds for the factions. And on the other side, this shows the abilities of the compounds and extra values for the damaged and supply counters. Counter sheet number 2 is just chock-a-block with these murder of horrors, murder being the collective noun for these horrors, and these advance towards you and attack everything in sight. And here's the other side. Here's counter sheet number 3, showing you the standees for the characters in the factions, which will move on the board. And here's the mutants. Here's sheet 4. Here are the civilians that you have to rescue. These are the VIP civilians. More normal civilians there. More horrors, more damage and exhausted counters. Here are the NPCs that can be involved in the game. The other side of the civilian counters have some little in-jokes and whatnot, because you can see here's Ancaldi's Italian Deli. We've also got Moe's Game Store, Artie Wolf's Whiskey Emporium, Player Financial Aid, and the most important one, of course, is the War Room Furniture. And just to finish off, a sort of half sheet of round counters. These are the turn order ones we put into a bag and pull to see whose turn, or indeed if something nasty happens. And these can be used as sort of reminders of who's going to be doing combat and how many actions you've used. This one, incidentally, is I think for 3 players, because there's an odd number. When that's drawn, it's a wild counter, if you like. You can choose who gets the extra turn. The other side just tells you what's going on with those counters. There are some baggies, some standee holders, bases, and a bag of cubes. Green, yellow, and red, with black for hit points, and the yellow, red, and green are to do with the biohazard stuff. There's a couple of rather nice bags. We've got one to put the turn order counters in, and another for the nasty biohazard cubes. 6 custom combat dice, depending on what you throw, tells you how successful you've been. And 3 sort of sealed decks of cards. Let's have a look at those. Here's the first one. It's the Fate deck, a nasty deck, which tells you what track the horrors are spawning on and which one is going to be creeping towards you, with the Fate number here, which you'll use instead of a die roll most of the time, and whether or not you're going to pick an event card if you do something called a follow-on. And then the event cards, these are bad generally speaking as well. Bigfoot lives, so that one of the mutants will appear on the map on the board. And this is very tongue-in-cheek, lots of little jokes and things that will make you smile as you play through it. There we are. And lastly, the search deck. If you decide to do search as one of your actions, you can pick one of these and see what you get, because supplies and such are very important. There we are. That's the cards. There are also 4 of these sort of playing card size summary cards, which list all the actions that members of your factions can do, as well as follow-on actions. So that's quite handy. And lastly, we have the mounted board or map. So let's have a look at that. Here it is. A little bit lumpy because I've just got it out the box, but it's a sort of up and down map, if you like. I'll play it like this because I haven't got a table that's deep enough. But a fantastic looking map board. And up here are where all the horrors are going to start, and they're going to spawn and move down these tracks. And here, these are called areas. Some have got buildings, some have woods, some are clear. We've got areas where we can cross over left or right, whereas the horrors and the mutants have to move down these tracks until they come to a fork, if you like, and you pick a fate card and see which side they're going. Over here we've got an escape route. We've got the beaches where we can evacuate. We've got helicopters that can land and evacuate civilians or get them to the docks here, as long as they're not damaged. So there we are. That's everything in the box. And that is Hermann Luttmann's brand new game from GMT, the Plum Island Horror. So this has been an Open the Box, an unboxing of a mutant battling game, the Plum Island Horror, designed by Hermann Luttmann and published, of course, by GMT Games. As some of you may know, I love my war games, but I also play other, if you like, non-war games, and I think this might come into that category. But I tell you what, having played it live a couple of times, it's great fun, and I'm looking forward to getting my copy out and playing. Yeah, I think I'll play solo. So there we go. Hope you enjoyed that and you found it interesting. If you did and you haven't done so already, it would be great if you would consider subscribing to the channel. Really does help. Pushing that like button, the thumbs up underneath the video, also helps tremendously as well. And if you want to be informed of other content the channel uploads, then push the old bell, but make sure you push all notifications. Otherwise, YouTube may forget to tell you. As always, I encourage you to leave a comment. This has been out a little while across the pond. It's taken what seems ages to get to us over here. So many of you will have had this and played it. There's a few videos on it already. I dare say mine will be added to it in the fullness of time. But what do you think? Let me know. I know what I think, having played it a couple of times, but what's your opinion? Let me know. I love to read them. Thanks as always to my subscribers. Thank you so much. And just before I go, if you wish to support the channel a little bit further, you can buy the channel a coffee, and there's a link for that in the description, or you can push the super thanks button directly underneath the video. If you decide to do that, thank you so much. It just helps the channel to keep ticking along with bits and pieces that are needed. Right then, that's Plum Island Horror out the way. And at the time of videoing, I think there's an expansion just gone up on P500, so check that out if that's of interest. So I hope you can join me for the next video. But until then, as always, you take care and goodbye.